Wulf and his men plundered and defiled Meduseld, and it was said that they slew many of the women and children who had taken refuge there. The Golden Hall of Meduseld, once a proud symbol of Rohan's strength and unity, was reduced to ashes. Its grandeur, its history, and its legacy were crushed beneath the boots of Wulf and his vengeful horde. The echoes of weeping children and grieving mothers mingled with the acrid stench of smoke, leaving a scar on the heart of Rohan that would never fully heal. But who was Wulf? What drove this man to defile the very soul of the Riddermark, turning its golden plains into fields of fire and blood? This is the story of a man who rose from exile and shame to claim vengeance against an entire kingdom. A tale of betrayal, ambition, and a burning hatred that consumed not only Wulf himself, but all those who stood in his way. To understand Wulf's descent into darkness, we must first step back to the reign of Helm Hammerhand, the mighty King of Rohan. Wulf was the son of Freca, a lord of mixed Dunlending and Rohirric blood. Freca's holdings lay near the borders of Rohan, a region steeped in tension and mistrust. Though Freca was a man of wealth and influence, his ambitions reached far beyond his station. Freca dared to challenge King Helm himself, seeking to strengthen his power by proposing a marriage alliance between his son Wulf and Helm's daughter. But the king saw through Freca's schemes, recognizing the ambition and deceit that drove him. When Freca's demands turned into insults, Helm's response was swift and brutal. He struck Freca dead with his bare hands, an act that cemented his reputation as Hammerhand, but also planted the seeds of a bitter feud. Wulf, witnessing his father's humiliation and violent death, fled into exile. Stripped of his status and homeland, he carried with him the searing memory of his father's demise and a hatred for the line of Helm that would shape the course of his life. In exile among the Dunlendings, Wulf grew into a man hardened by bitterness and loss. His mixed heritage, once a source of derision, became a rallying point as he forged alliances among his father's old kin. He stoked the flames of their grievances, uniting the clans under a shared hatred for the horse lords who had taken their lands and oppressed their people. But Wulf was no mere warlord. He was a cunning strategist. Recognizing the limits of Dunlending power, he sought allies far beyond the borders of Rohan. He forged pacts with the Easterlings, promising them wealth and plunder in exchange for their swords. With their aid, Wulf raised an army vast enough to challenge the might of the Riddermark itself. His ambitions were not merely to avenge his father, but to claim the very throne of Rohan. Wulf swore an oath to sit upon the throne of Meduseld and see the House of Helm cast down, their blood staining the very halls where his father had been slain. To achieve this, he knew he would need more than brute strength. He needed to strike at the heart of Rohan when it was most vulnerable. That moment came during the long winter, a time of devastating famine and cold that brought the kingdom to its knees. As the crops failed and the people starved, Wulf's army swept across Rohan like a storm. Villages burned, the plains turned red with the blood of the Rohirrim, and their once proud riders were driven back, unable to muster the strength to resist. Finally, Wulf stood at the gates of Edoras, the capital of Rohan. With the Golden Hall towering above him, he laid siege to the city. The defenders, weakened by hunger and despair, fell swiftly. When the gates were breached, Wulf and his men poured into the city, claiming Meduseld as their own. But Wulf's vengeance did not stop at victory. His fury turned to cruelty as he defiled the very heart of Rohan. The women and children who had sought refuge within Meduseld were shown no mercy, their lives snuffed out in a horrifying act of retribution. The once golden halls echoed with the cries of the innocent, their glory tarnished forever by the bloodshed. With the throne now his, Wulf declared himself King of Rohan, a title he believed was his by right of conquest. Yet, even as he basked in his triumph, the seeds of his downfall were already being sown. Wulf sat in Meduseld and called himself king, but the true king of Rohan, Helm, still held out in the Hornburg. Long was the winter, and bitter the vengeance of Wulf, but his doom was drawing nigh. Wulf's conquest of Rohan was swift and devastating, but it was far from absolute. Though he had claimed the Golden Hall and proclaimed himself king, his grip on the Riddermark was tenuous at best. In the mountains of the Westfold, the true King of Rohan, Helm Hammerhand, still resisted. From the fortified Hornburg, later known as Helm's Deep, Helm and his remaining forces waged a desperate struggle to reclaim their homeland. The long winter, one of the most devastating in Rohan's history, took its toll on both sides. The snow blanketed the fields, leaving crops buried and herds decimated. Famine stalked the land, and even the mightiest warriors of the Rohirrim were reduced to shadows of their former strength. But Wulf's army, composed of Dunlendings and Easterlings, unused to the harsh winters of the Riddermark, fared no better. Hunger gnawed at his men, and the bitter cold seeped into their bones. Despite the hardships, Wulf's vengeance burned brighter than ever. He sent raiding parties into the Westfold, hoping to crush Helm's resistance once and for all. But the king, known for his indomitable spirit, refused to yield. Tales of Helm's resolve spread like wildfire. How he would prowl the snowy night unarmed, striking terror into the hearts of Wulf's soldiers with his bare hands. It is said that Helm's eerie horn, sounding from the depths of the Hornburg, became a harbinger of death for any who dared approach. For months, the war dragged on, with neither side able to claim victory. Yet, while Wulf held the throne in Edoras, it was a hollow triumph. His rule was marked by fear and brutality, and his forces were slowly eroding under the weight of starvation, disease, and the unrelenting winter. As the long winter wore on, Wulf's confidence began to falter. The Dunlendings, who had once rallied to his cause, now grew restless, their loyalty fraying under the strain of famine and defeat. Meanwhile, Helm Hammerhand prepared for a final stand, rallying his surviving warriors for a desperate charge to retake Edoras. It was during this final confrontation that Wulf's doom was sealed. As the snows began to thaw and the first signs of spring emerged, Helm led his forces out of the Hornburg, charging headlong into Wulf's encampments. The attack was brutal and unrelenting, fueled by the desperation of a people fighting to reclaim their homeland. Wulf, knowing his end was near, refused to flee. Instead, he chose to face Helm himself. The two met in the shadow of Meduseld, the hall that had been defiled by Wulf's vengeance. The battle between them was fierce, a clash of wills as much as weapons. But in the end, Helm's strength and determination proved too great. Wulf fell, his life extinguished in the very land he had sought to conquer. With Wulf's death, the remnants of his army scattered. The Dunlendings fled back to their homelands, and the Easterlings abandoned the fight. Helm Hammerhand reclaimed Edoras, restoring Rohan's sovereignty and beginning the long process of rebuilding a kingdom ravaged by war. Though Wulf's campaign ended in failure, his story remains one of the most tragic and compelling in Rohan's history. He was a man consumed by vengeance, driven to reclaim what he believed was his by right, but in his quest for power, he brought untold suffering not only to the Rohirrim, but to his own people as well. Wulf's legacy serves as a cautionary tale about the destructive nature of hatred and ambition. His rise and fall echo through the ages, a grim reminder of the cost of vengeance and the fragility of power built on violence. What do you think of Wulf's story? Was he a villain consumed by hate, or a tragic figure driven by circumstance? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into the history of Middle-earth, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Consider becoming a member to support more epic explorations of Tolkien's world. Your contributions help us keep the fires of knowledge burning.